Okay, let's dive in. Welcome everyone to the Deep Dive. Today we're sifting through a pile of sources. You send us news articles, reports, transcripts. We're going to unpack the tragic Air India flight AI-171 crash in Ahmedabad.
Yeah, think of this as us helping you get quickly up to speed on what all these different sources are saying. We want to look past the headlines, really, get into the key details, the human stories, which are just devastating, and also the technical questions that are starting to emerge from the material.
Absolutely. Our goal here, using everything you've provided, is just to pull out the most crucial bits of information, the key insights about this awful event. So the basics from the sources. June 12th, 2025, Air India flight AI-171. It's a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner.
Right, flying from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick, and it crashed very shortly after takeoff.
Yeah, and the scale of it is,
Wow.
yeah, it's huge. The sources are calling it one of the deadliest aviation accidents in India's recent history.
Absolutely. Hundreds of lives affected, both people on the plane and, tragically, people on the ground, too.
So let's start right there. The event itself. What did the sources tell us about those critical seconds, those moments right after takeoff?
Okay, so the flight AI-171, it took off from Ahmedabad Airport at 1:38 p.m. local time. That's 08:08 UTC.
And it didn't get very high, did it?
No, not at all. According to the sources, the highest it reached was only 625 feet. But what's really alarming is that the transponder signal, the thing that tracks the plane, it stopped transmitting properly much lower, around 230 feet.
Wow, and that was fast, like 30 seconds after takeoff.
Roughly, yeah. One source specifically says it crashed within just 1 minute of getting airborne. It was incredibly quick.
And there's video footage, which we'll discuss more later, but it shows the plane climbing initially, sort of descending, but while pitching up.
Yeah.
That sounds wrong.
It's definitely not right. It suggests a struggle for controller performance. And we know the crew knew something was terribly wrong. They issued a mayday call. The sources say they reported a loss of power, loss of thrust very soon after takeoff.
A mayday. One source quotes the pilot just saying, "Mayday, mayday." Chilling.
It really is.
Yeah.
And then the crash itself, it hit a building.
A medical college hostel, right.
Yeah.
BJ Medical College in the Meghaninagar area. Not far from the airport at all.
No, about 1.5 kilometers from the runway. Eyewitnesses reported multiple explosions, a massive fireball when the plane hit the building and slid.
Just horrific. The images described in the sources, the plane's tail section resting on top of the hostel building. It's hard to picture.
Yeah, the damage was clearly immense. And that brings us to the human cost, which is just staggering.
Okay, let's talk about that. The sources say 242 people were on the plane.
That's right, 230 passengers, and that included children, infants, plus 12 crew members.
And the survival rate.
Tragically, 241 people on board died.
Oh my God. And on the ground.
At least 38 people killed in the hostel building. So if you add that up, the total death toll reported across the sources comes to around 279 people.
Unbelievable. And among those on the ground, medical students, interns.
Yes. The dean of the college mentioned that most students in a dining hall that got hit managed to escape, thankfully. But about 10 or 12 were trapped by the fire.
It's just layers upon layers of tragedy. But then there's this one story. The lone survivor.
Right. Amidst all this loss, one person survived the crash itself. His name is Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, a 40-year-old British national of Indian origin.
And he was in seat 11A.
Yes, right by an emergency exit.
Nah.
His account, as reported in the sources, is incredible. He said his section of the plane broke off on impact. It landed on the ground floor of the hostel. He somehow unbuckled his seatbelt and got out through an opening where the exit door had broken open.
What did he say about it? It must have been chaos.
His quotes are just harrowing. Things like, "Everyone around me was either dead or dying, and I still don't understand how I escaped."
I can't even imagine. He was injured.
Yes, multiple injuries, burns included, but the sources say he's out of danger now. His family flew over to be with him.
But his brother didn't make it.
No, tragically. His brother was on the same flight but seated elsewhere. Didn't survive.
God, the pain for that family. And there are other stories too, right? So much loss.
So many. The sources highlight a few. Arjun Patolia, 37, from London. A father.
He was returning after scattering his wife's ashes in India. She'd passed away from cancer.
That's the story, yes. He leaves behind 2 young daughters, just 8 and 4, now orphans.
That's just devastating. I saw something about a fundraiser.
Yes, one source mentioned a fundraiser set up for the girls' future had raised around £400,000, a huge outpouring of support.
Thank goodness for that, at least. Who else?
Nurat Jahar, 29, from Leicester. She'd called her husband just minutes before the flight took off, excited to come home.
Oh no, why was she in India?
She'd stayed back to care for her father while her brother was away on a pilgrimage. Her husband flew to India as soon as he heard the news.
Just awful. And others mentioned.
Ketan Shah, 43, returning home after visiting his sick father, and Ash Harrington, 27, died along with his father and his grandmother on the same flight. His mother shared her grief online. It's just unimaginable loss.
And a prominent political figure was also on board.
Yes, Vijay Rupani. He was the former chief minister of Gujarat from 2016 to 2021. He was also among the victims.
Identifying everyone must be incredibly difficult.
Extremely. The sources mentioned the severity of the impact, the fire. It's making identification very challenging. They're relying heavily on DNA tests, dental records.
How many have they identified so far?
As of a few days after the crash, the report said 19 victims identified via DNA, and 12 bodies have been released to families. It's a slow, painful process.
Okay, let's shift slightly to something else. The sources cover extensively that viral video of the crash.
Yes, the video. It was everywhere, almost immediately.
Yeah.
And it provided this instant, very raw view of what happened.
It was filmed by a teenager, Aryan Asari, 17 years old.
That's right. He lives near the airport. He initially told authorities and media he was just, filming the plane taking off on his phone.
Why? Just because he was interested?
Apparently, yeah. He said he wanted to show his friends how planes fly. He'd never actually been on a plane himself.
And he just happened to capture this plane at that moment.
Incredible timing, wasn't it? He recorded the plane starting to descend and then saw it become a ball of fire, as he put it. Flames, an explosion. Just seconds after he started recording, he thought it was maybe going to land nearby at first.
Wow. How did that affect him, seeing that?
The sources say he was deeply traumatized, visibly distressed, scared. His sister and landlady described him being unable to speak properly, couldn't sleep, very withdrawn, understandably.
He spoke to the police.
Yes, as a witness. He went with his father. The authorities made it clear he wasn't detained or arrested or anything like that, just providing his account.
But there was some confusion about whether he actually filmed it himself.
Right, that's an interesting detail. While early reports said he filmed it, one source later mentioned he apparently stated he'd screen recorded it from a friend who had filmed it, and then he shared it with his dad.
Okay, so a slight wrinkle there. But regardless, the video itself, it was crucial, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It gave investigators immediate visual evidence even before they got to the black boxes, and it was one of the first things the world saw.
But that virality, it raises questions, doesn't it?
It definitely does. The sources touch on this, the ethics of sharing such graphic content, the psychological impact on people watching it, especially the person who captured it. Where's the line between documenting a tragedy and, responsible sharing?
A really important point. Okay, let's turn to the investigation itself. Finding out why this happened.
Right. India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, the AAIB, is leading the probe.
And they're getting international help.
Yes, assistance from the UK's AIIB and the US NTSB. Plus, India's aviation regulator, the DGCA, and Air India are doing their own parallel inquiries.
What about the black boxes, the flight recorders? Did they find them?
They did. It took about 28 hours of searching in the wreckage, but they found the first enhanced airborne flight recorder. These combine the flight data and cockpit voice recording.
Okay, and the second one?
Found later that same day, so they have both.
Anything else recovered?
Yes. Sources mention a digital video recorder, a DVR. This apparently records footage from cameras outside and inside the cabin. That could be incredibly valuable.
So with that evidence starting to come in, what's the initial focus? What are the sources suggesting might have gone wrong?
Based on the preliminary information reported in the sources, a major factor being looked at very closely is the aircraft's landing gear.
The landing gear. How could that cause a crash right after takeoff?
Well, eyewitness accounts and some early data mentioned in the sources suggest the gear didn't retract after the plane left the ground. It stayed fully extended.
And that's bad.
Very bad. It creates enormous aerodynamic drag. It's like, imagine trying to accelerate your car while also pressing the brake pedal lightly.
Okay, so it would struggle to climb.
Exactly. It severely hampers the aircraft's ability to gain altitude and speed. And if you can't gain speed, you can lose lift. It can lead to a stall or just an inability to fly properly.
So why wouldn't it retract? What are they looking at?
Several possibilities mentioned in the sources. Could be a mechanical failure, hydraulics, electrics, could be crew error. Maybe they didn't initiate the retraction or accidentally stopped it, or even something external like a bird strike hitting the gear or debris damage during takeoff.
And the cockpit voice recorder? Does it give any clues?
Reports cited in the sources suggest it does. Apparently, the CVR data indicates the pilots were aware of a gear problem and were trying to troubleshoot it.
But they just ran out of time. And altitude.
That seems to be the implication. Not enough height, not enough time to figure it out and recover before the crash.
How long until we get official answers?
Well, the sources say a government panel might issue a preliminary report within about 3 months, but the full, final report could take a year, maybe even 2. These things take time.
Has there been speculation about other causes?
There always is. Sources mention some chatter about things like a rare double-engine failure or even a cyber attack. But importantly, the sources stress these aren't confirmed findings or even main lines of inquiry from the official bodies right now. The landing gear seems to be the primary focus based on early info.
And what's the immediate reaction from the authorities, like the DGCA?
They've ordered extra checks. Starting June 15th, additional pre-departure technical inspections for all of Air India's Boeing 787s.
Focusing on specific things.
Yes, specifically on systems like landing gear components, fuel systems, engine controls, a direct response to the potential factors in this crash.
What about the maintenance history of this specific plane? VTJNW, was it?
Yes. The sources mentioned that an initial look at its maintenance logs reportedly didn't show any recent issues with the landing gear system. But, they'll be scrutinizing those records much more deeply now.
And the plane wasn't brand new, but not ancient either.
No, about 11 or 12 years old. Apparently, it had undergone routine checks and was considered airworthy before departure.
Okay. And you mentioned misinformation earlier. Those fake videos.
Right. It's worth reiterating that fact-checkers quickly debunked several videos claiming to show the final moments inside the cabin. They were from old, unrelated incidents. Just shows how careful you have to be with information spreading online after something like this.
Definitely. Now, what about the wider response from officials, organizations?
There's been a significant response, as you'd expect. India's prime minister visited the crash site, met the survivor, met those injured on the ground.
And the rescue efforts.
Described in the sources as being conducted on a war footing. Coordinated by the Home Minister, Gujarat's chief minister. Multiple agencies involved: fire services, military disaster response teams. A massive effort.
Any political reaction?
The president of the Congress Party called for compensation for victims' families and demanded accountability for the crash.
And internationally, especially from the UK, given the destination and the survivor.
Yes, the British Prime Minister expressed condolences. Crisis teams were set up in both the UK and India, and King Charles III requested a minute's silence at the Trooping the Colour ceremony. Senior royals wore black armbands as a mark of respect, a significant gesture.
What about Air India and Boeing?
Air India's leadership expressed deep condolences, focused on supporting victims' families and assisting the emergency services. Standard, but necessary. Boeing's CEO canceled plans for a major air show, offered condolences, and importantly, sent an expert technical team to help the investigation. GE Aerospace, the engine maker, did the same.
Did the sources mention any impact on Boeing, like their stock?
Yeah, one source noted their stock futures dipped after the news broke. These events always have ripples through the industry.
And compensation for the families. What are the sources saying there?
Okay, so Tata Group, Air India's parent company, announced $10 million per deceased passenger. That's about US $120,000. Plus medical costs for Mr. Ramesh, the survivor.
Was there a call to include the victims on the ground?
Yes, the Indian Medical Association requested that the compensation be extended to the medical students affected in the hostel.
Is there a standard liability amount?
Under international agreements, yes. The sources mention Air India's liability is around $15 million per passenger, roughly US $180,000. Air India then announced an additional $2.5 million on top of the Tata Group's amount. So the total from the airline and parent company comes to $12.5 million per deceased passenger, according to the sources.
And the flight number. They've retired it.
Yes, standard practice after a major crash. Flight AI-171 and the return flight AI-172 are no more. The routes are now AI-159 and AI-160. Air India Express also retired its related flight number IX-171.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive into the sources really paints a picture of a multi-layered tragedy.
It really does. You have the devastating speed of the accident itself, just seconds. You have the almost unbelievable story of the lone survivor, then the immense, heartbreaking personal losses, so many individual stories highlighted in the sources, and the strange modern element of the viral video captured by accident.
Yeah. And now the focus shifts fully to the investigation, piecing together the data from the recorders.
Exactly. With those early signs, as reported, pointing strongly towards that landing gear issue as a critical factor preventing the plane from flying safely.
The goal now, for everyone involved in aviation safety, is understanding exactly what sequence of events led to this.
Absolutely. To learn lessons, to prevent anything like it happening again, all while families and communities are just beginning to grapple with their grief.
And as we step back from all this information drawn from the sources, it does leave you thinking, doesn't it? About that video, for instance. That tension between technology enabling instant documentation, which was clearly valuable here, and the potential psychological cost, the ethical questions around sharing such traumatic content.
How do we balance that? The need to know the value of evidence versus the human impact of capturing and broadcasting tragedy. It's something these sources implicitly ask us to consider, a difficult question with no easy answers.